take a breath. Let the noise fade. Here's what most men don't see coming. You lose power the moment you try to prove you have it. The tighter you grip, the faster it slips. The louder you defend yourself, the less anyone listens. And somewhere in all that effort to stay in control, you realize you've already lost it. This isn't new. 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius stood in the chaos of war, betrayal, and empire, and chose stillness over reaction. That same Stoic discipline is what we're building today. Because emotional control isn't about suppressing what you feel. It's about reclaiming your presence, your respect, your quiet authority, without needing anyone's permission. And here's the truth that stings the more you react, the smaller you feel inside. So let's change that. Starting now. 1. Emotional control. When emotion owns you, you lose yourself. When emotional control slips, you lose yourself. You know that quiet panic when you check your phone once, twice, a dozen times. You tell yourself it doesn't matter that you're fine, but you're not. Your chest tightens. Your mind replays small details, and the silence from someone else suddenly feels louder than your own voice. That's how self-loss begins. Not with noise or drama, but with a man waiting for someone else to decide when he can feel calm again. You send her a message. Simple. Maybe plans, maybe just to connect. She reads it, but doesn't reply. You reason with yourself, she's busy. But minutes turn to hours, and the calm you're trying to hold starts to slip. You scroll, you distract yourself, but inside, you're negotiating, replaying conversations, doubting your worth. You become both the judge and the accused in a trial that exists only in your head. Meanwhile, she moves through her day unfazed, grounded. The shift in power didn't happen when she stayed silent. It happened the moment you let her silence define your peace. This is where most men lose their center. They think stoic emotional control means pretending not to care. They force calm. They suppress the urge. They act unbothered, but their restraint is built on tension, not awareness. Suppression is not mastery. It's resistance waiting to break. True composure begins with acceptance. To stay calm doesn't mean to kill the feeling. It means to witness it rise, to see it clearly, and still choose to remain your own. Emotion is not the enemy, attachment to its outcome is. Here's the deeper truth. You can't control how anyone responds. You can only decide how long their energy lives in your mind. Power is not in being unaffected. It's in returning to yourself faster each time something shakes you. When you act from ego, you chase validation. When you act from awareness, you chase peace. The difference is everything. One makes you dependent. The other restores your dignity. And here's the practice, not to fear, but to remember. Step 1. When the urge hits to check, to send, to react, pause for 30 seconds. Feel the restlessness. Let it breathe. Step 2. Take 1 full inhale, 1 full exhale. Step 3. Ask yourself, what am I chasing right now? Peace or validation? Step 4. If it's peace, stay still. Let the silence be what it is, just space. Step 5. If it's validation, recognize it, but don't move. Awareness itself is the discipline. Calm isn't performance. It's presence. It's built through small acts of observation, watching yourself want to react, and deciding not to hand over control. That's where real strength forms, in the space between emotion and expression. Power begins where reaction ends. Not when you stop feeling, but when you stop being ruled by what you feel. The opposite of control isn't rage, it's dependence. It's when her silence becomes your storm, her mood, your temperature, her attention, your anchor. That's not love. That's surrender of self. And silence. Real silence isn't about looking unbothered. It's about standing still inside your own storm. It's the presence of self, not the absence of emotion. Most men don't know what to do with the chaos underneath. They know they shouldn't react, but they haven't learned how to sit with the pressure without moving. That's the real training. To feel it all and still stay seated within your own peace. That's where you reclaim yourself. 2. Emotional control. The lie of staying calm. Why bottled emotions always explode. There's a version of emotional control most men wear like armor. It looks composed, sounds mature, and passes easily as strength. But underneath, it's not peace, it's postponement. You swallow the irritation. You silence the urge to speak. You smile, nod, and tell yourself you're being the bigger man. Maybe that's true. But what you bury doesn't disappear. It waits quiet, patient, and unfinished until it finds another way to surface. You've lived this before. You're in a meeting. You've worked for weeks on a project. You start speaking, laying out your thoughts, and your boss cuts you off. Not rudely, just carelessly. Like your voice didn't matter enough to finish. You stop, nod, and let him continue. You tell yourself it's fine, that you're composed, that it's not personal. And maybe on the outside, it isn't. But that night, when the lights are off and the noise fades, the moment comes back. His voice cuts through yours again. You imagine what you should have said, what you could have done. The emotion you buried at 2 p.m. is now alive at 2 a.m., pacing inside your mind. That's what unprocessed emotion does. It doesn't vanish. It waits. It grows quiet, roots under your composure. You think you've moved on, but the tension stays. It shows up later in your tone, your body, your exhaustion. What you silence doesn't leave you. It lingers until it speaks in ways you don't intend. Most men have been trained to equate composure with silence, to believe that strength means nothing, shows no matter what happens. And yes, in moments that demand professionalism, restraint can be wise. But when silence becomes your only way of coping, you're not in control. You're accumulating pressure. And pressure, no matter how refined, always finds a crack. The Stoics understood something simple but profound. What you refuse to face today will speak through your reactions tomorrow. Not in words, but in tension, in irritability, in the small moments where calm suddenly fractures. You think you're holding it together, but really, you're holding it in. True emotional control isn't the art of suppression. It's the practice of presence, the willingness to face what's real without letting it own you. Real composure doesn't come from hiding emotion, but from processing it before it becomes poison. And that takes awareness, not performance. Here's the practice. Step 1. Before you sleep, open your phone or a notebook. Step 2. Write one line, just one. What emotion tried to speak today? No journaling, no analyzing. Just name what showed up, but never got a voice. It might be frustration, disappointment, embarrassment, pride, loneliness. Whatever it is, give it form even briefly. Let it exist outside of you. The purpose isn't to vent, it's to understand. Because once you name what you feel, it stops being a shadow. It becomes something you can see, something you can work with. That's the moment emotion loses its control and becomes insight. Do this for 7 nights. Then watch how quickly you return to balance after irritation. You'll notice that the same moments that used to loop in your head begin to fade sooner. Not because you're tougher, but because you're clearer. Awareness releases what suppression multiplies. And this is the quiet truth most men overlook. Calm that hides pain isn't calm, it's pressure, a dam, not a river. Real composure is movement, not stillness. It's the continuous flow of awareness, meeting emotion, naming it, and letting it pass through instead of hardening inside. That's the difference between a man who is genuinely grounded and one who's one bad day away from breaking. In the professional world, this matters deeply. Society rewards the man who never flinches, who stays quiet, delivers results, and doesn't complain. That image can earn respect, but it can also cost you your peace if it becomes your identity. Tactical silence has value, but emotional resilience for men requires something deeper recovery. Resilience isn't about not feeling the hit. It's about how fast you return to yourself afterward. And that can't happen through denial, only through awareness. So don't mistake control for compression. Don't confuse a blank face with inner strength. If you hold everything in just to prove you can, you're not cultivating power, you're collecting pressure. The goal isn't to hide emotion. It's to redirect it, to take the energy that once became resentment and turn it into clarity, the kind that refines your focus instead of feeding your frustration. That's the work, the art of self-mastery and emotions. To live with emotion, not under it. To meet every feeling with awareness and every silence with strength. That's how real calm is built, not as a mask, but as mastery. 3. Emotional control. How calm turns into command. Most men misunderstand what emotional control really means. They think it's about yielding, backing down, or letting things slide to avoid conflict. They confuse composure with compliance, and then wonder why their silence is mistaken for weakness. But calm isn't surrender. It's not a lack of reaction. It's quiet direction in the middle of chaos. The man who pauses when tension rises isn't hesitating or afraid he's choosing his outcome. That pause, that single breath between what happens and how he responds, is where power lives. Imagine this. She's upset. Maybe it's something you did. Maybe it's something you didn't. Maybe it's something else entirely. But you happen to be in the line of fire. Her words come quick, sharp, full of emotion. And underneath it, there's a pull, an invitation for you to match her energy, to argue, to explain, to defend. This is the moment where most men lose themselves. They either go quiet emotionally, disconnected, hiding behind silence, or they rise to her level, word for word, tone for tone. In both cases, control is gone, because in both, reaction wins. But when you pause, everything changes. You don't interrupt. You don't rush to respond. You take a full breath, stay grounded, meet her eyes, not with defiance, not with coldness, but steady presence. And when the noise fades, you say one line, "I'll respond when we're both calm." That's all. No defense, no justification, no need to explain what she got wrong or why you're right. Just clarity, without emotion, without resistance. What happens next is simple. The argument stops. It has nowhere left to go. Conflict needs participation to survive, and you just refused to feed it. That's the principle behind Stoic emotional control. He who pauses directs the outcome, not through dominance or force, but through awareness, through the ability to stay unmoved while everything around you pulls for a reaction. Control isn't about winning an argument. It's about deciding whether the argument even continues. And that decision begins in the pause, in the quiet space between her last word and your next. Here's the practice. Step 1. Apply the 3-second rule. Before you respond to anything emotionally charged, a message, a comment, a confrontation, pause for 3 full seconds. Step 2. Count them slowly. 1, 2, 3. Step 3. Don't plan what you'll say next. Don't build a defense. Just breathe. Create space between the trigger and your reaction. Step 4. Then, if it still needs to be said, respond calmly, simply once. Try this 5 times a day. Whether it's tension or irritation, practice pausing. Each time you feel the pull to react, stop, breathe, then move. You'll start noticing something. Most of what you wanted to say no longer needs to be said. The urge to defend or to prove fades when you give it oxygen instead of fuel. The biggest trap men fall into is believing that peace comes from being understood. They think that if they explain themselves clearly enough, the tension will disappear. But over-explaining isn't clarity. It's insecurity, disguised as reason. Real calm doesn't need validation. It needs precision. Speak less, but speak with intent. Say what's necessary once, then stop. Don't fill the silence. Don't soften your message with unnecessary words. Trust that your truth stands on its own. When you begin to live this way, your energy changes. Your words start to carry weight because they aren't competing with noise. People listen, not because you demand it, but because your calm commands it. Stillness unsettles chaos. When everything around you is loud, fast, emotional, and you stay grounded, the energy shifts. Chaos needs resistance to grow, and you give it none. So it collapses. This isn't coldness. It isn't about shutting down or pretending not to care. It's about knowing that your steadiness carries more influence than any argument you could win. In relationships, this difference is everything. Love doesn't thrive in reactivity. It thrives in safety. And safety comes from a man who stays centered when emotion rises, a man who can hold the room steady, even when the storm hits. That's what separates the man who demands respect from the man who commands it. One needs validation. The other radiates presence. And presence isn't something you perform. It's who you become when your calm is real, when it's built not from avoidance, but from self-mastery. Because calm becomes command only when it's rooted in emotional resilience. For men, the discipline to remain grounded when others lose balance, and the power to turn stillness into quiet authority. 4. Emotional control. Stop spending energy on what you can't control. Most men don't collapse from exhaustion. They collapse from distraction. Not from the weight of their work, but from the noise they keep trying to control, the endless loop of reacting, defending, explaining, and managing outcomes that were never theirs to manage. By nightfall, they feel drained. Not because they did too much, but because they gave too much attention to things that didn't deserve it. The truth is simple: you can't project strength while wasting energy on noise. Picture this. You're scrolling. Someone posts something you disagree with. It doesn't concern you. It doesn't affect your life, but it irritates you. You comment. They respond. You reply again. Before you realize it, you're 3 paragraphs deep in a debate with a stranger who won't remember your name by tomorrow. Or maybe it's her. She's distant. You feel it. You ask what's wrong. She says nothing. You don't believe it. So you ask again. You write a thoughtful message, just vulnerable enough. You send it, wait, and the silence grows heavy. You start wondering if you said too much or too little. Hours pass, and now your body is here, but your mind is elsewhere, analyzing, replaying, building stories. And by the end of the night, you're hollow, empty, and nothing has actually happened. That's what quiet depletion looks like, losing energy, not through effort, but through unnecessary engagement. The Stoics understood something most men forget. Emotional control is the art of guarding your attention. Energy follows attention. Guard it like wealth. Your attention is a currency. Every time you spend it trying to manage the uncontrollable, you're losing ownership of yourself. And the debt builds slowly. By evening, you feel tired in a way sleep can't fix. Restless, irritable, disconnected. Because all day you've been bleeding energy into arguments, assumptions, and invisible battles that lead nowhere. You weren't exhausted from action. You were drained from reaction. That's why Stoic emotional control matters. It teaches you to separate what's within your influence from what's merely noise. It's not detachment from life, but discernment. The quiet discipline of choosing where your energy belongs. So here's the practice. Step 1. At the end of each day, take inventory. Not with guilt, with honesty. Ask yourself, how many moments today did I spend reacting to what didn't matter? Count them. The online debate, the overthought message, the imagined conversation you rehearsed in your head, the checking, the doubting, the managing of someone else's perception. Add them up. That's your emotional debt. And you'll see, it's never the big events that drain you. It's the small ones, the quiet leaks of attention that keep your mind scattered and your presence fractured. Step 2. Before bed, write one simple line. Where did my energy go today? Not a full journal, not reflection or analysis, just one sentence. Maybe it went to work. Maybe it went to worry. Maybe it went to trying to fix something that didn't need fixing. Do this for 14 nights. What happens next isn't dramatic. It's gradual, like fog lifting. Your focus sharpens, not because you force it, but because awareness creates friction. Once you see where energy is leaking, you naturally stop letting it leak. You pause before reacting. You hold your attention before giving it away. And a new question starts to guide you. Does this deserve me? Most of the time, the answer is no. Restraint becomes your strength. Not as suppression, but as discipline, the ability to spend energy with precision instead of impulse. This is the foundation of self-mastery and emotions directing your attention like a weapon instead of scattering it like confetti. This is what separates men who burn out early from those who grow sharper with time. The difference isn't effort, it's economy. One treats his attention as sacred. The other spends it on every distraction that calls his name. In relationships, it's the same divide. One man is exhausted from trying to control every emotional shift. The other stays calm because he manages himself, not the outcome. Real masculine energy lives there not in control over others, but in sovereignty over your own focus and reaction. When you stop leaking energy into what you can't control, something quiet awakens. You stop performing presence and start living it, because presence isn't something you create. It's what remains when the noise stops consuming you. And that kind of presence doesn't need to demand attention. It draws it naturally, not because you're doing more, but because you've stopped wasting yourself on less. 5. Emotional control. The kind of calm that makes women trust you. Most men misunderstand attraction. They think it's built on excitement, on chemistry, novelty, and emotional highs that keep her guessing. And sure, that spark has its moment, but it fades. Intensity burns out. And when it does, what remains isn't the man who made her feel the most. It's the man who made her feel safe. Not safe as in dull, safe as in steady, grounded. The kind of man whose presence feels calm even when life doesn't. Whose emotions don't swing louder than his words. Because here's the truth. Most men avoid attraction. Dies the moment your emotional state becomes her weather. You've seen this happen. She pulls back. Not dramatically, just quietly. Shorter texts, slower replies, less warmth in her tone. There's no fight, no explanation, just distance. And this is where most men lose themselves. They start chasing, asking what's wrong, trying to fix something that may not need fixing. They send messages filled with reassurance, overthink every pause, and bend their entire rhythm toward her. The gym gets skipped. Work loses focus. Sleep turns restless. Life becomes a waiting room for her next response. But when you stay in rhythm, something shifts. You notice the distance, but you don't fall into it. You still move. You train. You handle your work. You keep your rituals alive, not to prove you don't care, but because your life doesn't orbit anyone's approval. And that difference is everything. She feels it, Not through what you say, but through what you don't change. You're not performing stability. You are stability. Your energy doesn't wobble when hers does, and that stillness speaks louder than any reassurance ever could. Here's the principle most men overlook. Emotional control builds trust faster than charm. Charm is the spark. Emotional control is the foundation. It's what tells her, this man doesn't lose himself when things get uncertain. Women don't fall for the man who's always performing. They fall for the one who's reliable, not because he's unshakable, but because he's real. The man who doesn't need her attention to feel whole. The one who doesn't use validation as oxygen. So here's the practice. Step 1. Choose one ritual that centers you, something that belongs entirely to you. It doesn't involve her. It doesn't depend on anyone else. It's yours. Step 2. Do it every day, without fail, not out of habit, but out of respect for your own balance. It could be the gym, a walk before sunrise, 10 minutes of silence before the day begins. Whatever it is, make it non-negotiable, because when chaos hits, when she's distant, when work is heavy, when life tilts, that ritual becomes your anchor. It's what keeps you from drifting into anxiety or reaction. It reminds you, I'm still here. I'm still whole. My peace isn't conditional. And this is what most men never understand. Women don't test your feelings. They test your balance. They're not wondering if you care. They already know you do. What they're really asking, even without words, is, does he lose himself when I pull away? If you do, if your entire sense of calm depends on her, she stops feeling safe. Because she's not your partner anymore. She's your regulator. And that's not attraction. That's dependency. Dependency drains connection faster than distance ever could. The real mistake men make is using calm as a tactic. They act composed, stay silent, delay responses, not out of peace, but out of strategy. That's not self-control. That's performance. The shift comes when you stop using calm to manage her and start using it to protect yourself. When your peace is genuine, when it's something you maintain for your own sake, not for her reaction. That's when calm becomes magnetic. Because it's real. Because it's rare. Calm is the most seductive emotion. Not passion. Not intensity. Calm. Because calm says, this man isn't ruled by chaos. He's not fragile. He doesn't need someone else to steady him. He already knows how to steady himself. That's what creates trust. Not through words or promises, but through energy, through presence. Because emotional resilience for men isn't about shutting down. It's about staying open while grounded. It's the strength to feel deeply without losing direction, to hold your peace steady, even when everything around you shakes. Emotional control is not suppression. It's self-leadership. It's the quiet authority that turns safety into attraction and stillness into magnetism, because real masculine energy doesn't perform peace. It is peace. And that's the kind of calm that makes a woman trust you, not because you're trying to hold her, but because you're already holding yourself. 6. Emotional control. The inner battle. Every man must win, There's a battle most men fight every day. It's not against the world, not against women, work, or circumstance. It's against themselves, against what they feel, but refuse to admit. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that men don't get jealous, that men don't feel insecure or small or afraid, that wanting reassurance somehow makes you weak. So when those emotions rise, and they always do, you don't face them. You rename them. You feel jealousy, but you call it logic. I'm not jealous. I just think she's being disrespectful. You feel fear, but you call it focus. I'm not scared. I'm just being careful. You feel inadequate, but you call it ambition. I'm not small. I just have goals, and maybe that helps you survive for a while. Maybe it keeps you moving without looking too deeply. But what you suppress doesn't vanish. It waits. It grows quietly in the dark, shaping you from the shadows. It looks like this. She posts a photo. You see another guy in it. Maybe a friend, maybe nothing. But something tightens in your chest. You tell yourself, it's not jealousy, you're just being observant. So you analyze the angle, the caption, the timing. You build stories in your mind about what it means, why it feels off, why maybe you should say something. But under all that reasoning, you're just scared. Scared she's losing interest. Scared you're not enough. Scared of being replaced. And because you won't name it, you can't release it. So it festers. It turns into tension, into distance, into the kind of coldness that comes from hiding the truth, even from yourself. This is the trap. You think denying emotion makes you strong, but denial doesn't create strength. It creates performance. And performance always cracks under pressure. The Stoics understood this long before us. What you deny will rule you. What you face will teach you. Every emotion you feel, jealousy, fear, anger, loneliness, isn't there to destroy you. It's information. It's your internal compass trying to tell you what matters, what you're protecting, what you're afraid to lose. But you can't hear the message if you're busy pretending the feeling doesn't exist. That's where emotional control begins, not by silencing the feeling, but by learning to listen without letting it lead. So here's the practice. Step 1. The next time something triggers you, something she says, something you see, something that makes your chest tighten, pause. Step 2. Don't react. Don't rationalize. Don't force composure while your thoughts spiral. Step 3. Ask yourself one question. What truth about me is this emotion showing? Then stay with it. Let it sting if it must. Maybe it's showing that you don't feel secure in the relationship. Maybe it's showing that you've tied your worth to her attention. Maybe it's revealing a fear of being seen as less by her, by yourself, by the world. Whatever it is, don't run from it. Don't fix it. Just let it be real. Because the moment you can look at an emotion and say, that's what this is, the moment you stop fighting it, it starts to lose control over you. Not because you defeated it, but because you brought it into awareness. And awareness ends the war. You're not at war with your feelings. You're at war with your refusal to acknowledge them. And that fight drains you more than anything else, because a part of you always knows the truth. Once you see clearly, the struggle softens. You can feel jealousy, and still choose not to act on it. You can feel fear and still move forward. You can feel small and still carry yourself with dignity. But only if you're willing to name what's real. That's the essence of self-mastery and emotions, not the suppression of what's human, but the leadership of it, the ability to hold a storm without becoming it. And here's the truth about self-respect. Most men overlook. You can't respect yourself if you're lying to yourself. Every time you disguise emotion with logic, you tell yourself that who you are, complete with insecurity, doubt, and vulnerability, isn't acceptable. That lie eats away at you quietly. It separates you from your own truth. But when you start facing what's real, when you stop performing strength and start building it from honesty, you stop needing to prove anything to her, to anyone, because you've already proven it to yourself. When emotion becomes information, not identity, not drama, not shame, you reclaim your peace. You stop being at war with your own mind. And that's where emotional resilience for men begins, not in resistance, but in recognition, not in denial, but in awareness. That's how you stop fighting yourself and finally stand in quiet power. ChatGPT said 7. Emotional control. Speak. Less command, more. The world today is drowning in words. Everyone's talking, explaining, defending, filling every silence as if quiet has become unbearable. We've confused loudness with importance, speed with confidence, noise with presence. But here's what most men don't realize. Silence from a grounded man carries more power than 1,000 opinions. Not the silence of confusion, not withdrawal, but the silence of choice. The kind that listens first, waits for clarity, and speaks only when the moment calls for it. You can see this anywhere. You're in a meeting, the room buzzing with tension. Everyone's talking over each other, defending their view, repeating themselves just to feel heard. The air is filled with urgency, ego, and noise. And you wait. Not because you're uncertain, but because you understand something that most never do. The first to speak doesn't lead the room. The one who waits for the right moment does. You listen. You let the noise burn itself out. And when the air finally clears, you speak one line, calm and clear. And suddenly, the room shifts. Not because your words are louder, but because your silence made them heavier. This is what emotional control looks like. It's not withdrawal. It's presence in its most deliberate form. The Stoics had a rule for this: speak only if it improves silence, not if it makes you look smarter, not if it helps you win, only if it adds more truth, more clarity, more direction than the quiet already holds. Most of what people say doesn't pass that test. They speak to be seen, to feel relevant, to fill the space that silence exposes. Because silence feels like absence, and absence feels like loss. But in a world addicted to noise, silence becomes unforgettable. Not cold silence, not distance disguised as calm, just the quiet strength of a man who doesn't waste his voice where it's not needed. So here's the practice. Step 1. Before replying in a meeting, a message, an argument, pause for 2 full seconds. Step 2. Ask yourself, Am I adding weight or just noise? Weight brings clarity. It moves the moment forward. Noise does the opposite. It fills, distracts, and dilutes what matters. And you'll notice something. Most of what you were about to say is noise. Not because it's untrue, but because it doesn't change anything. It doesn't deepen the silence. It just interrupts it. When you begin filtering your words through that awareness, your presence changes. You speak less, but what you do say lands deeper. People listen, not because you've become more charismatic, but because scarcity creates value. Your words begin to carry the gravity of restraint. This is where Stoic emotional control reveals its power, not as suppression, but as composure. The ability to hold tension without spilling it, to stay measured when others react. True self-mastery and emotions begin here in the pause before reaction, in the breath before speech. That pause is where leadership is born. Control of emotion is control of perception. When you rush to explain, defend, or fill every gap with your voice, people don't hear confidence. They hear need. And need repels respect. But when you stay composed, when you can hold tension in silence, people feel it. They see someone who doesn't speak out of impulse, but out of intent. That kind of control commands attention without asking for it. This principle holds everywhere in leadership, in relationships, in any space where presence matters more than performance. The man who talks constantly fades into the background, but the man who speaks rarely and speaks with clarity becomes a quiet force. His words ripple long after the room falls silent. You don't have to fight for space or prove your worth. You just have to trust that when you do speak, it will matter. That trust is built in the pause, in the moments when you could speak, but don't. Because silence isn't emptiness. It's potential. It's the still point before motion. And the man who can hold that silence without needing to escape it becomes the center of gravity wherever he stands. People notice who doesn't flinch when the room goes quiet. They notice who stays grounded while everyone else scrambles to be heard. They remember that man, not because he was the loudest, but because he was the stillest. That's leadership. Real leadership doesn't shout or flood space with direction. It calibrates. It knows when to speak and when to let others find their rhythm. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Just stand there, composed, and let your presence speak for you. Because presence doesn't come from words. It comes from the quiet confidence that you don't need them. So speak less. Not from fear, not from doubt, but from strength. Speak less because your silence has become its own language. And the people who can truly hear it will understand more than words ever could. Calm isn't an act. It's not a strategy. It's what remains when you stop reacting to every noise, stop chasing validation, stop proving your worth. It's built in the pause, in the breath before you respond, in the space where you choose awareness over impulse. And when you carry that kind of emotional control, real, grounded, effortless, calm, everything shifts. People sense it. Women trust it. And you stop needing anyone to remind you who you are, because you already know. That's the quiet power. That's the magnet. Now build it.